כי באורך כולי אורי 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 שיר נערי כבוד השם עלייך נגלה כבוד השם עלייך נגלה na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya 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 בואי בשלום, בואי בשלום הדרך בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצער עולם. תוך אמוני יעשה כולם, בואי חלה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה.
שיבי תפתח בי היד בנישי בתלפי הוקות אליו שגעלה הוקות אליו שגעלה
בואי בשלום בואי בשלום הדרך בעלה גם בשמחה ובצער עולם. תוך אמוני יעשה כולם, בואי חלה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. בואי בשלום, בואי בשלום הדרך בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצער עולם. תוך אמוני יעשה כולם, בואי חלה, בואי חלה,
בואי חלה, בואי חלה,
בואי חלה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה.
אשכחך ירושלים תשכח ימיני תדבק לשויני ולך כי lo ezkerechi imesh kochech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini titbach shoyni lefiki im lo ezkerechi im lo ya'ale im lo ya'ale mesiru sholo ibarosh simchosi simchosi
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Parsha study. My name is Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and I will be your host during the flight. So buckle up your seatbelts, get your cup of coffee or your cup of tea, and let's get going. So we are this week going to do Parshat Vayigash, and just give me a second here. I'm going to open it up. And Parshat Vayigash begins in, was it Genesis 44? I believe it's chapter 44. Benjamin, yeah. Chapter 44, verse 18. And we are going to go through to 47:27 in the numbering system. So let's start with this, maybe a little pre-Parsha information. Where did the numbering system, okay, so we have this numbering system of chapters and verses. Where did this come about? Because it certainly isn't this way. It certainly isn't this way in the Tanakh, right? There's no such thing as chapter and verse. So let's go to, for lack of a better place to go, by Wikipedia for a second, and let's find out. Okay, so I'm just going to read here some chapters and verses of the Bible. The chapter and verse divisions did not appear in the original texts. They form part of the paratext. So paratext would be like the metatext, right? The material that surrounds a published main text supplied by the authors, editors, printers, and publishers. These edited elements form a frame for the main text and can change the reception of a text or its interpretation by the public, etc. Since the early 13th century, so we're talking about 1200s, most copies and editions of the Bible present all but the shortest of these books with divisions into chapters, generally a page or so in length. Since the mid-16th century, editors have further subdivided each chapter into verses, each consisting of a few short lines or sentences. Esther 8:9 is the longest verse in the Bible. I actually didn't know that. Let's check out it. Esther 8:9. Well, let me bring this up here for 1 second here. Let's share. Let me stop sharing here. Stop screen, and then we can share screen. And then the Chrome tab, and then this. I'm going to share audio on this. Okay. So let's check out Esther 8:9. Esther 8:9. Let's see what we have here. There you go, Esther 8:9. ויקרא סופרי המלך בעת ההיא בחודש השלישי הוא חודש סיוון ב23 בו ויכתב ככל אשר ציווה מרדכי אל היהודים ואל האחשדר פנים והפחות ושרי המדינות אשר מהודו, הודו is India, ועד כוש 27 מאה במדינה. Okay, so this is basically about this is about Ahasuerus sending out letters to the provinces that the Jews can defend themselves. When we get to Purim, you guys can all join my my Purim study, and I always do it the same way. I do a oh boy, I'm getting off track, but that's all right. No big deal. We don't have to get to work by 9 o'clock today or something like that. So I always, when I study the book of Esther during Purim, I always do a reverse study. I start with the last chapter and I work my way back to the first chapter. And the reason I do this is because everyone ignores the last chapters, which are so important for the actual laying down of the holiday. It gives all the details of how the holiday was set down, just as the first book of Maccabees, the end of chapter 4, I believe, gives the details of how the holiday of Hanukkah was laid down. So I always study the book of Esther in reverse, and it actually reveals a lot of things that you wouldn't notice otherwise. Sometimes when you study a story in reverse, you see things that you didn't see before. Okay, I'm getting way off track. So back to this chapters and verses in the Bible we're talking about, and then we'll unravel one more time. We'll unnest. We're getting into nested loops here. We'll unnest and go back to our parsha. So, since the mid-16th century, editors have further subdivided each chapter into verses, each consisting of a few short lines or sentences. Esther 8:9 is the longest verse in the Bible. Sometimes a sentence spans more than one verse, as in the case of, and they give an example from the New Testament, so if you get that, and sometimes there's more than one sentence in a single verse, as in the case of Genesis 1:2. Okay, the Jewish divisions of the Hebrew text differ at various points from those used by the Christians. For instance, in Jewish tradition, the ascriptions to many psalms are regarded as independent verses or parts of the subsequent verses, whereas established Christian practice treats each psalm ascription as independent and unnumbered, making 116 more verses in Jewish versions than in the Christian. Some chapter divisions also occur in different places. E.g., Hebrew Bibles have 1 Chronicles 55, 27 to 41, where Christian translations have 1 Chronicles 6, 1 to 15. That's a chapter division. Okay. We'll read a little bit more. Early manuscripts of the biblical texts did not contain the chapter and verse divisions in the numbered form familiar to modern readers. In antiquity, Hebrew texts were divided into paragraphs, parashot, that were identified by 2 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Peh indicated an open paragraph, and we can actually see that. Oops, let me go back far enough. I think they show it in this text. Well, maybe they don't show it in this text. They just show it by making a new paragraph. So if you get to the end of a paragraph and you say peh, that stands for patuach, that's open paragraph, that began on a new line, while samech indicated a closed paragraph that began on the same line after a small space. Samech stands for sagur, skura, and then it's basically like the difference, let's say, between a paragraph break, a peh or a patucha would be a paragraph break, and a skura would be maybe peh would be maybe a chapter break, and a skura, a samech, would be a paragraph break. These 2 letters begin the Hebrew words ptucha and segura, and are themselves open in shape and closed. The earliest known copies of the book of Isaiah from the Dead Sea Scrolls use the Parshot divisions, although they differ slightly from the Masoretic divisions. This is different from the use of blah, blah, blah. Okay. The Hebrew Bible was also divided into some larger sections. In Israel, the Torah, its first 5 books, were divided into 154 sections, so they could be read through aloud in weekly worship over the course of 3 years. In Babylonia, it was divided into 53 or 54 sections, Parshat Shavua, so it could be read through in 1 year. Yeah, so we do want the 1 year Ashkenazi one, just because, as I've mentioned in other studies, actually it was just started by Yaakov Ben Yisrael, who used to do these studies with me, and he decided that we should go according to what most Jews are doing in the world, just to stay relevant. And I just kind of acquiesced and went along. And now that I'm doing the studies without him, I just took over that idea. So I just do the weekly parsha. You know what? Let me do this for a second. See what I'm reading. Share. Chrome tab. And there we go. So you should be able to see that now. Okay. So yeah, so the reason we do it week by week is just because that was instituted by Yaakov, and I just continued it. I think it's a good idea, actually. Kind of makes you stay relevant. But there's no canonical reason that we're studying this parsha this week, except that this is what most Jews do. The New Testament, forget the New Testament. Okay, Archbishop Stephen Langton. So this is a guy that's usually attributed to breaking up the Bible into the chapters, and at least the chapters and verses. So Archbishop Stephen Langton, well, let me read this part too about the New Testament, just for the heck of it. The New Testament was divided into topical sections known as Kephalaya by the 4th century. Eusebius of Caesarea divided the Gospels into parts that he listed in tables or canons. Neither of these systems corresponds with modern chapter divisions. See full discussion below, which you won't see. Chapter divisions with titles were also found in the 9th century Tours manuscript, Paris Bibliothèque Nationale, blah, 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 the so-called Bible of Rodrigo, which I don't even know what that is, actually. Archbishop, I should look it up, though, but not now. One second. I'll just make a note for myself to look it up later. No, I think it's a New Testament thing. No, I'll look it up afterwards. Okay. Anywho, Archbishop Stephen Langton. So who is this guy? Stephen Langton was an English cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church and Archbishop of Canterbury between 1207 and his death in 1228. The dispute between King John of England and Pope Innocent over his election was a major factor in the crisis which produced the Magna Carta. So this guy's pretty famous in other contexts. And Cardinal Hugo de Sancto Caro developed different schemas for systematic division of the Bible in the early 13th century. It is a system of Archbishop Langton on which the modern chapter divisions are based. So that's basically, this is the guy, Stephen Langton. So who is Stephen Langton? Once again, he lived in the 1200s, and he was a cardinal in England, a Roman Catholic cardinal who lived in England. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury in the early 1200s, and other stuff which we won't get into. So that's it. This is basically our modern chapter and verse divisions. Our modern chapter divisions can be attributed to this guy, Stephen Langton. Busy system. Okay, we read that. While chapter divisions have become nearly universal, editions of the Bible have sometimes been published without them. Such editions, which typically use thematic or literary criteria to divide the biblical books instead, include John Locke's Paraphrase and Notes on the Epistles of St. Paul. It's New Testament stuff. Alexander Campbell's Sacred Writings, etc. We can skip all of this stuff. I have something in my eye. Okay. So that's chapters, verses. Since at least 916, the year 916, the Tanakh has contained an extensive system of multiple levels. Maybe I should make this bigger for those following on the screen. Where do we go? Yeah. Since at least 916, the Tanakh has contained an extensive system of multiple levels of section, paragraph, and phrasal divisions that were indicated in Masoretic vocalization and cantillation marks. So these are what's called the ta'amim, the different marks that you'll see in typical Masoretic text. One of the most frequent of these was a special type of punctuation or sof pasuk, symbol for a full stop or sentence break resembling the colon of English and Latin orthography. While the advent of the printing press and translation of the Bible into English, with the advent of the printing press and the translation of the Bible into English, Old Testament versifications were made that corresponded predominantly with the existing Hebrew full stops, with a few isolated exceptions. Most attribute these to Rabbi Isaac Nathan ben Kalinumi's work, the first Hebrew Bible concordance, around 1440. First person to divide New Testament chapters, we can skip that. Jewish tradition. And we'll just read this section and then we'll actually get into the Parsha. The Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible notes several different kinds of subdivisions within the biblical books. Psukim, most important of the verses, or Psukim, according to Talmudic tradition, the division of the text into verses is of ancient origin. In Masoretic versions of the Bible, the end of a verse, or sof pasuk, is indicated I'll show you that it's indicated by a small mark in its final word called a siluk. Less formally, verse endings are usually also indicated by two horizontal dots following the word with a siluk. So let's see what that looks like just for 1 second. Oh, this is going to all of them. Okay. So pasuk, cantillations of pasuk, pasik, sigil. These are all the different cantillation marks. So let's see if we can find a siluk. I can't find it right now. So pasuk. Okay, anyway, it's that. It looks like a colon. That's one. There's another one called the siluk, which I don't see it right here. But let's unravel. The Masoretic text also contains sections or portions called parashot or parshiot. The end of a parsha is usually indicated by a space with a line, a closed section, or a new line beginning an open section. So this is basically paragraphs and you could say chapters. The division of the text reflected in the parsha is usually thematic. Unlike chapters, the parashot are not numbered, but some of them have special titles. In early manuscripts, most importantly in Tiberian Masoretic manuscripts such as the Aleppo Codex, an open section may also be represented by a blank line and a closed section by a new line that is slightly indented. The preceding line may also not be full. These latter conventions are no longer used in Torah scrolls and printed Hebrew Bibles. In this system, the one rule differentiating open and closed sections is that open sections must always start at the beginning of a new line, while closed sections never start at the beginning of a new line. Another division of the biblical books is found in the Masoretic text is division into Sidarim. Division is not thematic, but is almost entirely based upon the quantity of the text. For the Torah, this division reflects the triennial cycle of reading that was practiced by the Jews of the land of Israel in medieval times. Okay. Well, this is interesting. Should I go on? I think this is interesting. I'm going to go on a little bit more. Christian versions. The Byzantines also introduced a concept roughly similar to chapter divisions called kephalaya, singular kephalion, literally meaning heading. The system, which was in place no later than the 5th century, is not identical to the present chapters, unlike the modern chapters, which tend to be of roughly similar length. This distance from one kephalion mark to the next vary greatly in length within a book and from one book to the next. For example, Sermon on the Mount, comprising 3 chapters in the modern system, has but one kephalion mark, while the single modern chapter 8 of the Gospel of Matthew, this is all New Testament stuff, so I don't really care that much, has several, one per miracle. Moreover, there were far fewer kephalaya in the Gospel of John than the Gospel of Mark. Okay, this is all New Testament stuff. I'm going to skip this. Okay. One second. The division of the Bible into chapters and verses has received criticism from some traditionalists and modern scholars. Critics state that the text is often divided in an incoherent way or at inappropriate rhetorical points, and that it encourages citing passages out of context. Nevertheless, the chapter and verse numbers have become indispensable as technical references for Bible study. Some modern publications of the Bible have eliminated numbering of chapters and verses. Biblica published such a version of the NIV in 2007 and 2011 and 2014. Crossway published the ESV Reader's Bible, which I think we have. And Biblioteca published the modern ASV. Projects such as Ichtus also exist with strict chapter and verse numbers from existing translations. Okay. Bible statistics. The number of words can vary depending upon aspects such as whether the Hebrew alphabet in Psalm 19, the superscriptions listed in some of the Psalms, and the subscripts traditionally found at the end of Pauline epistles are included, except where stated the following apply to the King James Version of the Bible and the modern blah, 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 blah. So there, okay. 929 chapters, etc., etc. Okay, so that's just a breakdown, different statistics about chapters and verses. And so on and so forth. Okay, so so once again, for chapters, the modern system was basically done by this guy, Archbishop Stephen Langton. And then verses. Oops. One second. Verses, we have the cantillation marks, which we could see extensively in the Masoretic texts. And then with the advent of the printing press and the translation of the Bible into English, Old Testament versifications were made that correspond predominantly with the existing Hebrew full stops. With a few isolated exceptions, most attribute these to Rabbi Isaac Nathan ben Kalaniumi's work for the first Hebrew Bible concordance around 1440. So the verses came predominantly from this person, to this Rabbi Isaac Nathan ben Kalonimus's work. And he wrote a concordance. The Meir Netib was the first Bible concordance in Hebrew and was distinguished from the similar Latin work of blah, 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 in that its vocabulary was arranged in the order of the roots. His work is aimed to facilitate the study of Bible exegesis and to prevent Jewish converts to Christianity from making in their religious controversies incorrect quotations from the Bible, as was often the case with Geronimo de Santa Fe. The Meir Netib, with its complete introduction, was first published at Venice in 1523 and 1556. It was published. Okay. All right. So that's that. Chapter and verse. We went off on a long tangent, but no big deal. So we're back in Genesis 44. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to just grab a cup of water. And then we will get into the study itself. Or into the Parsha itself, I should say.
איש חיים נמצא ורחוק מפנינים מכרה בוטח בו לבן לו ושלום לא יחזור איש חיים נמצא ורחוק מפנינים מכרה בוטח בו לבד לו ושלום לא יחזור שכן אחר והבל היופי אוי והבל היופי אישה ירס השם ידיס הלב שכן אחר והבל היופי אוי והבל היופי אישה ירס השם ידיס הלב
Therefore
בטח בו נבלו ושלום לא יחזור בטח בו נבלו ושלום לא יחזור שכן אחר בהבל היופי אוי בהבל היופי אישו ילס נסעה שכן אחר בהבל
Okay, so here we are, we're back, and now we're going to start reading through this week's Parsha, Vayigash. Vayigash is the Parsha in which Yosef finally reveals himself to his brothers. Remember the whole thing, the whole convoluted story, how convoluted incidents that the brothers had to go through. They went down to Egypt, and then eventually Joseph requested that Benjamin come down. And when Benjamin came down, then the Joseph chalice, his magic chalice, was found in Benjamin's sack on the way out, and they were brought back to the city. And now here they are back in Egypt, and they are basically sitting around eating with Yosef, who was acting very strange, justifiably so. And that's where we're going to pick up the story. Okay. And by the way, I should say that this is actually my favorite parsha, probably in the entire Tanakh. I know they're all great, but if I had to choose one, this might be it. And I'm going to do what I usually do and I'm going to read first only in Hebrew. So let me bring up the screen. Oops, there we go. Okay, so let me bring up the screen, and I'll read only in Hebrew at first, and then the reason I'm doing this is because I want to get through the parsha. A lot of times what we've done in the past, hold on one second, the cat's making noise on me. Sophie, come here, baby. Come on. Come here, you. What do you want? You want to go back there? All right. Cat problem solved. Okay, so let's go. And we are in chapter 44, verse 18. And let's do this. Vayigash elav Yehuda, vayomer bi Adoni, yidaber na avdecha davar be'azne Adoni, va'al yahar apcha be'avdecha, ki chamocha ki faro. Adoni sha'al et avadav, לאמור, היש לכם אב או אח? הוא אומר אל אדוני, יש לנו אב זקן, וילד זיכונים קטן, ואחיו מת, ויוותר הוא לבדו, לאמו ואביו אחיו. ותאמר אל עבדיך, הורידוהו אליי, ואשימה עיני עליו, ונאמר אל אדוני, לא יוכל הנער לעזוב את אביו, ועזב את אביו ומת. ותאמר אל עבדיך, אם לא ירד אחיכם הקטון איתכם, לא תוסיפון לראות פניי. ויהי כי ענינו אל עבדך אבי, ונגד לו את דברי אדוני. ויאמר אבינו, שובו, שבריאו לנו מעט אוכל. ונאמר, לא נוכל לרדת אם יש אחינו קטון איתנו. וירדנו כי אם יש אחינו הקטון איתנו, וירדנו כי לא נוכל לראות פני האיש, ואחינו הקטון איננו איתנו. Verse 27, by the way. ויאמר עבדך אבי אלינו, אתם ידעתם כי שניים ילדה לי אשתי, ויצא האחד מאיתי, ואומר אך טרף, ולא ראיתיו עד הנה. Verse 29. ולקחתם גם את זה עם פניי, וקראו אסון, והורדתם את שיבתי ברעה שאולה. Verse 30. ועתה כי בואי אל עבדך אבי, והנער איננו איתנו, ונפשו קשורה בנפשו, והיה כראותו, כי אין הנער ומת, והורידו עבדך את שיבת עבדך אבינו ביגון שאולה. כי עבדך ערב את הנער מעם אבי, לאמור אם לא אביאנו אליך, וחטאתי לאבי כל הימים. ואתה יושב נא עבדך תחת הנער, עבד לאדוני, ונער יעל עם אחיו, כי אין אעלה אל אבי והנער איננו איתי, פן אראה ברע אשר ימצא את אבי. So Yehuda gives excuse me, just a second. So Yehuda gives a very, very passionate speech from the heart. All right, this is kind of right here, I would say this speech is, well, the next verses are the climax of the entire book of Genesis, if you want to look at it as a literary work of art, that this is now the climax of the entire book of Genesis. All of what Genesis is all about is leading to this point, the reuniting of the brothers in Egypt. It's almost like, when you get to the next verses and Yosef reveals himself, it's almost like it's just like the climax in a movie or in a book, right? It really is. Everything leads up to this, and after this, everything is kind of like downhill, not in the sense of bad things happening, but in the sense of all that too. But in the sense of the storyline now, goes after it reaches its climax, it now now kind of unravels towards the end, or kind of ties up loose ends to the end. Okay, but this is it. We are right now in Genesis chapter 4, which is very close to the end of the book of Genesis. We're basically now in the next verses what would be considered the climax of the entire Genesis story, right? Everything basically climaxes on this. Okay, so, and here it is, these verses. Chapter 45, verse 1. ולא יכול יוסף להתאפק לכל הנציבים עליו, ויקרא הוציאו כל איש מעלי, לא עמד איש איתו, והתוודע יוסף אל אחיו, ויתן את קולו בבכי, וישמעו מצרים, וישמע בית פרעה. יאמר יוסף אל אחיו, אני יוסף, עוד אבי חי, ולא יכלו אחיו לענות אותו כי נבהלו מפניו. So this is right here. This is the climax sentence. Genesis chapter 45, verse 3. We could say 1 through 3, but really verse 3. ויאמר יוסף אל אחיו, and Joseph said to his brothers, אני יוסף, I am Joseph. עוד אבי חי, is my father still alive? ולא יכלו אחיו לענות אותו, and his brothers could not answer him, כי נבהלו מפניו, because they were flabbergasted before him. Okay? So really, if you even want to narrow it down further, this statement right here, Ani Yosef ha'od avi chai, this is right here the climax of the entire book of Genesis. Everything leads down to this, the moment that Joseph reveals himself, with the details of how Joseph reveals himself. Okay, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? And that's the first thing he asks, the love he has for his father, even after the brothers have told him multiple times that his father is still alive, which we'll talk about when we get back into the analysis later. But okay, let's go on. Yomer Yosef el Ehaw, Ishuna Elai, Vayigashu, Yomer Ani Yosef, Achichem, Hashem machartem oti Mitzrayma, Ata. Can you just imagine what they must? Oh my God! Ata al ti'atzvu al yichar be'enechem ki machartem oti hena ki lemihya shelachani Elohim lifnechem. Verse 6. Ki zeh shenatayim hara'av bekerev haaretz ועוד 5 שנים אשר אין חריש קציר ויש לחני אלוהים לפניכם, לשום לכם שארית בארץ, ולחיות לכם לפליטה גדולה. עתה לא אתם שלחתם אותי הנה, כי האלוהים וישימו לאב לפרעה ולאדון לכל ביתו, ומושל בכל ארץ מצרים. Verse 9. מהרו עלו אל אבי ואמרתם אליו, כה אמר בנך יוסף, שמני אלוהים לאדון לכל מצרים, רדה אליי, אל תעמוד, ושבת בארץ גושן. והיית קרוב אליי, אתה ובניך, בני בניך, בצונך ובקרך, בכל אשר לך, וגידלתי אותך שם, כי עוד 5 שנים ורעב פן, תברש אתה וביתך בכל אשר לך. Verse 12. והנה עיניכם רואות ועיני אחי בנימין כפי המדבר עליכם. והגדתם, verse 13, לאבי על את כל כבודי במצרים, וכל אשר ראיתם, מיהרתם, הורדתם את אבי הנה, ויפול על צווארי בנימין אחיו. Just 1 second, I just had a thought. Just an interesting thought. I have to stop because this thought just came. The phrase was used earlier a number of times. First, Yaakov says it, that if Binyamin is not brought back, or if anything happens to Binyamin, if karahu ason, if some kind of tragedy happens to Binyamin, v'horradtem et sevati biagon she'ola, that you will have brought my you should translate this, hoary head, my white head, meaning my old, my old body, biagon she'ola, in agony. Biagon, and by the way, I think agony might actually be etymologically related to yagon. Maybe we'll check that out later. Yagon she'ola, you will have brought my hoary head in agony down into the grave. Okay, so, and then this phrase is repeated a number of times by Yehuda when he makes his plea to Yosef, right? In one case he says he uses the word yagon, and the other place he uses the word ra'a, I think. At any rate, it's in the previous chapters we just saw right now. At any rate, this phrase is used twice by Yehuda, I believe, at least twice, where he says, if we don't bring back Binyamin, you will have brought my father's, your servant, my father's hoary head down to the grave in agony. Okay? And now we see here, והגעתם להביא את כל כבודי במצרים ואת כל אשר ראיתם ומיהרתם והורדתם את אבי הנה. Bring down my father to here. Okay, so so how does the story work out? Okay, the brothers thought that he was going to be הורדתם את sevati biagon she'ola, that you will have that brought down his father's hoary head in agony into the grave, but instead, horadatem et avi hena, you'll bring down my father here. The same word, horadatem. Okay, so instead, this is again how man plans and God in the end works out the story. They thought that Yaakov was going to be brought down to the grave, and instead he's brought down, kept alive, and saved from Michaya, right? And it uses the word Michaya earlier, to saved alive, brought down to Egypt instead. It's the same kind of words that are being used. I don't know purposely, because I don't know if they're close enough, but it's just a thought I had. Maybe we'll examine it more when we go back over the parsha, okay? But it's the same kind of imagery. Instead of oradatem et seveti biyagon she'ola, oradatem et avi hena. Okay. Now, if I were a rabbinite, I'd say, oh well, Egypt is like a grave anyway. I'd do some kind of midrash on it, but I'm not going to go to that level. But I will say here it says oradatem et avi hena. And earlier Yosef says, let's just even find it. Michaya. Okay, but Eretz lechayot lechem lefleita gedola, but even says, anyway, it says you brought him down here to keep us alive. Okay, lechayot lechem lefleita gedola, to keep you alive, and for a great escape, for escaping from the land of Canaan, or from the famine. Okay, so instead of Yaakov being brought down to the grave in agony, he's brought down to Egypt to be kept alive. Similar language. At any rate, maybe we'll get back to that a little bit later. Let's go on. Okay. We'll start again in verse 13. Vayigash la'avi et kol kivodi b'Mitzrayim v'kol asher ra'item u'nihartem v'horadtem et avi hena. Verse 14. Vayipol al savrei Binyamin ahiv vayevch Binyamin bacha al savarav וינשק לכל אחיו ויבך עליהם אחרי כן דיברו אחיו איתו. Verse 16. הכל נשמע בית פרעה לאמור באו אחי יוסף ויטב בעיני פרעה ובעיני עבדיו ויאמר פרעה אל יוסף אמור אל אחיך זאת עשו תענו את בעירכם לכו בואו ארצה כנען, קחו את אביכם ואת בתיכם, ובואו אליי, ואתנה לכם את טוב ארץ מצרים, ואכלו את חלב הארץ. ואתה צווית זאת עשו. קחו לכם מארץ מצרים עגלות לטפכם ולנשיכם, ונסעתם אל אביכם ובאתם, ועיניכם אל תחוס על כליכם, כי טוב כל ארץ מצרים לכם הוא. Verse 21. ויעשו כן בני ישראל, וייתן להם יוסף עגלות על פי פרעה, וייתן להם צידה לדרך. לכולם נתן לאיש חליפות שמאלות, ולבנימין נתן 300 כסף ו5 חליפות שמאלות. ולאביו שלח כזאת 10 חמורים נושאים מטוב מצרים, ו10 אתונות נושאות בר ולחם ומזון לאביו לדרך. וישלח את, I guess they couldn't take the bus back then. They need a lot of provisions for the way. וישלח את אחיו ילכו ויאמר עליהם אל תרגזו בדרך. Verse 25. So here's so when you come down off the mountain, right, if you can think of a story as having its summit, its climax, when you come down off the mountain, you don't come straight down, you go down, up, down, up, down, up, right? And here's a little up, another kind of, you can almost call it a secondary climax, secondary summit, where Yaakov finds out that Yosef is still alive. Verse 25, Ya'alu Mitzrayim, Mi Mitzrayim, Yavo Eretz Canaan. And by the way, notice how it always says, and this is all throughout Genesis, even going back to Abraham, when they come up from Egypt, it always says Ya'alu, right? They went up from Egypt. When they go down to Egypt, it's always la redet, yaradetem, go down. So going from Egypt to Canaan is always discussed as going up, and going from Canaan to Egypt is always discussed or is always described as going down. There could be a number of reasons for that, which besides the spiritual reason of going up to the land of Israel, right? Today we call it Aliyah. You make Aliyah to Israel. You go up to the land of Israel, coming from, by the way, the biblical phrase for going to Israel. So you could say it has a spiritual aspect that you're going up, going down, right? Spiritually, I don't like to use that word too much, but going up to to the land that's promised you, to a bright place, going down to a place that's dark. Let's put it that way, right? But there could be other reasons as well. So Egypt is flat, right? We know it has the Nile River, and all around the Nile River is basically flat desert. So, and we know that Canaan, the land of Canaan, is the hill country, right? The hill country sometimes is explicitly called the hill country, right? So literally you're going from a place that's of lower elevation to a place that's of higher elevation, at least if you're going into the interior of Israel. So that could be another reason. And a third reason could be that, again, we've spoken about this a bit before, the direction, the system of directions in the Tanakh is always based on facing east, facing the rising sun. That's the way it was done in the ancient Near East. I don't know about in all cultures, but in many cultures. So going south is also associated with Yamin, going to the right, because if you're facing the rising sun, then the south is to your right. Going to the left is called tzafon, okay. But in Arabic, the word for going to the north is called tzafon. But in Arabic, the word for north, at least in modern Arabic, and I think in classical Arabic, is shamal, which means to the left, right? So it's that same system there. So we can consider, if we're facing the east, to figure out directions, right? Then going to Egypt would be going to the right, and going to Israel, going from Israel to Egypt would be going to the right, and going from Egypt to Israel would be going to the left. Oh no, I'm sorry, the system doesn't work. Scratch that. Because I was thinking that going to the right would be like going up, and going to the left would be like going down, but no, it doesn't work that way, right? So then going from Israel to Egypt would be like going up, or going to the right, which we forget it. Scratch that, doesn't work. It was just a thought I had as I was reading. Okay, let's go on. Ya'alu Mitzrayim yavo Eretz Canaan el Yaakov avihem, verse 26. Vayigidu lo lemor. So here's the second revealing, the second revelation. So this is really the book of Genesis, or this Parsha Vayigash, is really the book of Revelations, right? Because Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, and now the brothers reveal the existence of Yosef to Yaakov back in the land of Canaan. So where was Yaakov at this time, right? We tracked his movements, right? There was no GPS in that day, but we'll act like a GPS that tracks movements. We tracked his movements from and it's going back a couple of parshas already, from Aram Naharaim, from Padan Aram Haran. Okay, Haran, remember we said, is the city where he was. Padan Aram is the region within that the city of Haran falls in, roughly equivalent to northern Syria, southern Turkey. And then Aram Naharaim is the Aramean kingdom. Okay, Lavan was an Aramean. From there, he ran away, and they came to this place Gilad or Galed, where Yaakov made the covenant with Lavan, and basically got rid of Lavan because they made a covenant that Lavan would not cross this mound of stones, and Yaakov would not cross in the other direction. So that was the end of them, right? They never saw each other again for the rest of their lives. Thank God Yaakov ditched that, scumbag. At any rate, well, we shouldn't say that. After all, he was Rivka's sister and Rachel and Leah's father. So let's no, he wasn't. What am I saying? It was Rivka's sister and Rachel and Leah's. Oh, I'm having a mental block. Was the father? Betuel, Lavan? Yeah, okay. Right. Anyway, so yeah, I digressed again. So anyway, then Yaakov went from there, and then his next stop, if I remember correctly, was Pinuel. That's where he fought with the angel, and that's where he met Esav. So he goes from meeting Lavan to meeting Esav. Okay, he ditches Esav again, another guy he wants nothing to do with. He ditches Esav, and then from there he continues on to, if I'm not mistaken, Shechem. And from Shechem, right, then he has the whole incident in Shechem with Dinah and the people of Shechem. Oh, so Shimon Levi kill off the people of Shechem, and then he decides and is told to go to Bet El. He goes back to Bet El. Bet El is the same place where he had the original dream, the Jacob's ladder dream. Now he's back there. He builds another altar, and kind of that comes full circle from when he had left the land of Israel. That was his big stop on the way out of the land of Israel. From there he goes to from Bet El. Then he goes he heads towards Hebron to see his father Yitzchak, and then on the road to Efrat, that's where Rachel dies, and then eventually he makes it to Hebron. And then right after that, it mentions that his father Yitzchak dies. Okay, so that's in previous parshas. And so now, ostensibly, as far as I know, as far as I can see, he has stayed this entire time in Hebron. So he's in Hebron at this time. Where's Hebron? Hebron is about 10 or 15 miles south of Jerusalem. It's well, you can all look it up on the map. I've been there many times. So that's where he is. Hebron is the place where Yitzchak dies and is buried by his sons Yaakov and Esav in the cave of Machpelah. It says that explicitly, and that's where Abraham is buried. Sarah is buried, and eventually Yaakov will be buried there by Yosef. So okay, Ya'alu Mitzrayim Ya'avo Eretz Canaan El Yaakov Avihem. Verse 26. So to make a long story short, Yaakov at this point is in Hebron. Yosef Hai. Okay, so this is another. Yosef Hai. Yosef is still alive, right? And this is another. You could say this again is a second climax, a secondary climax of the entire story. The brothers telling Yaakov that Yosef is still alive, right? So Yosef says earlier. So what's the first climax we saw? That was the real climax, the real summit of the entire book of Genesis was right here. Yumer Yosef el Achiv, Ani Yosef ha'od avi chai. Okay, Ani Yosef ha'od avi chai. I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? Right. So that's the first climax, and it involves asking if the father is still alive, right? Which is a bit strange because the brothers have already said many times that their father is still alive. But I think Yosef we'll get into that when we go back and study more in detail. And now the secondary climax of the story is Od Yosef Chai. Yosef is still alive. So in the primary climax of the entire story of Genesis, Yosef says, "Is my father still alive?" And in the secondary climax, the brothers tell Yaakov that Yosef is still alive. Okay, so there's that kind of parallelism again. And indeed, he is the leader, the ruler over all of the land of Egypt. Oh, I forgot. We're just reading in the Hebrew at this point, but this is important. So I'll stop here for a second. Right? Can you imagine? I mean, just as shocked as the brothers must have been when Joseph says, "I'm Joseph." Right? Is my father still alive? Then Yaakov must have been just as shocked. Joseph is still alive. Okay, he thought he was dead many years ago. He had no intention of ever seeing his favorite beloved son Joseph again, and now he finds out that Joseph is still alive. And not only that, he's the ruler over Egypt, or the secondary ruler over Egypt. I mean, can you imagine this happen? You know, to you, right? Just put yourself in those shoes that you had, God forbid, a child that you thought was dead and you know thought died long ago, and all of a sudden you find out, you know, he's I don't know, the president of I don't know, the president of Chile. I don't even know if Chile has a president. I don't know what they have down there. Maybe it's a military dictatorship. No, I believe they have a president or something, or prime minister, right? I mean, you'd be in absolute shock, and so for Yaakov here. Okay. Any rate, we're sticking to the Hebrew. ויגידו לאמור, עוד יוסף חי, וכי הוא מושל בכל ארץ מצרים, ויפג ליבו, כי לא האמין להם. Okay, so it's kind of the same thing. Yifag means what? I didn't feed them. No, I didn't feed them. Okay. Yifag means like to pog means like to stop. You have to replace that water when you're done. Okay. And put it and give it back to me. All right. And excuse me for 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Back. So so basically it's, you know, Yaakov's heart stopped or skipped a beat. We could say, right? Maybe almost died of a heart attack, God forbid. I don't know, but it's the same thing before, or similar again to when Yosef reveals his identity, and it says, "V'lo yachlu echav la'anot oto ki nivhalu mipanav," and his brothers couldn't even answer him because they were flabbergasted. To translate as terrified, but I don't think it's a good translation. Flabbergasted in front by seeing his face. You know, that same kind of reaction, right? Which of course is understandable. I mean, who would ever expect this to be happening, right? Okay. And he didn't even believe them. Verse 27, وَيِدَبْرُوا أَلَاv et kol divrei Yosef asher diber alehem yar et ha'agalot asher shalach Yosef laset oto. See, he only believed them once he saw all of the evidence, the physical evidence. He saw the agalot, the wagons full of all the stuff that Yosef had sent, and now he sees, physical evidence. Right? This kind of almost goes against this, rabbinical, this, ridiculous rabbinical idea, this stupid, I'm sorry for lack of a better word, stupid rabbinical idea that, all the patriarchs were like some kind of like, magical, mystical people that could see everything, right? I remember arguing about a week and a half ago with a rabbinite, and he said, "Oh, Yaakov knew he was a prophet, so he knew everything that was going on. Why did he need, this proof of the agalot of the wagons? He should have seen this through prophecy." And I said to him, being a prophet of God doesn't mean that God tells you everything. It means that once in a while God tells you certain things. God speaks to you when he wants to. He doesn't reveal everything to a prophet. He doesn't even reveal everything to Moses. Moses never even went into the land of Israel, right? So it's this ridiculous idea that the rabbinites often do, turning the patriarchs or all of the the people of the Bible into like these magical, mystical supermen, as if they weren't even human anymore. They were almost like demigods or sons of God, right? Hint, hint. So, don't even know what the heck that means. Okay. So yeah, Yaakov was a human being, and the fact that he was a prophet doesn't mean that he's getting all the information about the world funneled to him. It means that a prophet means that God has spoken to you at least once, right? And in this case, basically, he usually speaks to an angel. Okay. At any rate, verse 27, וידברו אליו את כל דברי יוסף אשר דיבר אליהם, וירא את העגלות אשר שלח יוסף לשאת אותו, ותהי רוח יעקב אביהם. Verse 28, ויאמר ישראל, רב עוד, יוסף בני חי, אלך וארנו בטרם אמות. Okay, chapter 46. And we are up to 47, in the middle of 47. So we're in 46 right now. וישא ישראל כל אשר לו יבוא באר שבע. Now Yaakov goes back to Beersheba, which is in the opposite direction. Beersheba is north of Hebron. ויזבח זבחים לאלוהי אביו יצחק. And he sacrificed again. Again, Bet El is kind of, for Yaakov, Bet El is kind of like ground zero. Right? That's where he had his dream. That's where he came on his way back towards his father Yitzhak after he'd been through all of the stuff he'd been through with Lavan. That's where he stopped, and also made sacrifices, and now he's going back to Bethel to sacrifice. So Yaakov is very, very closely associated or linked with Bethel. Yaakov's Beit Hamikdash, you could say, is basically Bethel. And as I mentioned in previous parshas, I think at least there's evidence in the text. I don't know if there's any archaeological evidence whatsoever, but I think there's evidence in the text that Bethel, or hints in the text, and I don't usually like to go by hints in the text, but I think there are some strong ones, that Bethel might actually be the Temple Mount. I don't know that has any archaeological basis whatsoever. I know Bethel is usually associated with archaeological or historical. Bethel is usually associated with Bet-In, which is an Arab town north of Jerusalem, near the current settlement of Bethel. But perhaps it's incorrect, right? A lot of these archaeological finds might be incorrect, and I think there's evidence in the text that Bethel is actually the same as Jerusalem. So. Okay. So, where were we? So here now, Yaakov is going down to Egypt. Verse 1. וישא ישראל וכל אשר לו ויבוא באר שבע ויזבח זבחים לאלוהי אביו יצחק. Verse 2. ויאמר אלוהים לישראל במערות הלילה ויאמר יעקב יעקב ויאמר הנני ויאמר אנוכי האל אלוהי אביך אל תירא מרדה מצרימה כי לגוי גדול השמחה שם. אנוכי ארד ממך מצרימה ואנוכי אעלך גם עלו ויוסף ישית ידו על עיניך יקם יעקב מבאר שבע. Oh, I'm sorry. I am really off today on a couple of things. It's Beersheba he went to, not to Bethel. My mistake. I'm so sorry. Scrap all that. I don't know why I was thinking Bethel. So he went to Beersheba. Beersheba is to the south. Beersheba is where Abraham and Yitzhak had the the various incidents with Avi Melech over the wells. I'm sorry, my mistake. I don't know why I was thinking Bethel in my mind. Okay, oh well. Geez, that would have been great. That would have been a great Dvar Torah if it were actually Bethel, but it's not. Okay, maybe we can go back and change the text of the Torah to fit with my little Dvar Torah. Okay, hey, if the rabbis can do it, so can I. Yomer Anochi Ha'el Elohei Avicha Al Tira Merda Mitzrayim Ki God Gadol HaSimcha Sham Anochi Ered Imcha Mitzrayim. So, okay, Yaakov is not going up to the north to Bethel. He's going down from Hebron. He's going down basically south, maybe a little bit to the east to Beersheba. Okay. Yomer Anochi Ha'el Elohei Avicha Al Tira Merda Mitzrayim Ki God Gadol HaSimcha Sham. Verse 4, Anochi ered imcha Mitzrayim, Anochi alcha gam alo, Yosef yashit yado al enecha. Verse 5, Qam Yaakov me Beersheva, Vaisu bnei Yisrael, Yaakov ועת טפם ועת נשם, בעגלות אשר שלח פרעה, לשאת אותו. ויקחו את מתניהם, ואת רכושם אשר רכשו בארץ כנען, יבואו מצרימה, יעקב וכל זרעו איתו. Verse 7, בניו ובני בניו איתו, בנותיו ובנות בניו, כל זרעו הביא איתו מצרימה. Now here's something interesting. So it says, בניו ובני בניו, his sons and his sons' sons, איתו, בנותיו, his daughters, ובנות בניו, and the daughters of his sons. V'chol zaro hevi ito mitzrayma, his daughters and the daughters of his sons. Okay, so daughters implies multiple daughters, right? That Yaakov had multiple daughters. We only know of one, Dinah, and that his sons had daughters. Okay, now even if daughters, you could say, okay, it says daughters in general. That just means that one daughter, Dinah, and it also says his sons' daughters, right? Ubenot banav, his sons' daughters. Well, let's pay attention to something interesting when we go through now the list of names and the number at the end, okay? And we're going to find something very interesting about the way that the Torah counts. So, verse 8, وَأَلَ شِمُوت بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل هَبَائِيم مِصْرَيْمَ يعقوب وبناv بخور يعقوب رؤوبين وبني رؤوبين حنوخ وبالو وحسرون وكارمي وبني شمعون يموئيل يمين وأوهد يخين وتسوهر وشاول بن هكنعانيت وبني لوي جرشون كحات ومراري وبني يهودا عير وعنان والشلا وبرץ وزرح ويمات عير وعنان بأرץ كنعان ويهو بني برץ حצרון وحمול ובני יששכר, תולה, ופועה, ואיוב, ושמרון, בני זבולון, סרד, ואלון, ויחלאל, that's a beautiful name, I love that, ויחלאל, אלה בני לאה, אשר ילדה ליעקב, בפדן ארם, ואת דינה ביתו, כל נפש בניו ובנותיו, 33, ובני גד, בני גד, צביון, חגי, שוני, עצבון, ארי, וארודי, ואראלי, ובני אשר, ימנע, וישבה, וישבי, בריה, וסרח, אחותם, ובני בריה, חבר, ומחליאל, ומלכיאל. Now, one second here. ובני אשר, ימנע, וישבה, וישבי, ובארה, וסרח, אחותם. So this is only the second female that's being mentioned here. Serach, Achotam. We had Dinah being mentioned earlier. right? That was, where was it? One second. Did I mention Dina already? Or maybe not yet. בני לויגש וקטי מרן ויהודה אונן שלח ובני יששכר ובני זבולון אלה בני לאה אשר ידע ליעקב ודינה. Okay, so verse 14 mentions Dina. Okay, now we get to Bnei Asher, the children of Asher, and it says Waserach achotam. So this is the second female. So now this is the granddaughter of Yaakov. And this is only the second daughter that's mentioned in the entire clan. Okay? Ubenei Beri'ah Hever Malkiel אלה בני זלפה אשר נתן לה ביתו ותלד את אלה ליעקב 16 נפש. בני רחל אשת יעקב יוסף ובנימין ובלל ליוסף בארץ מצרים אשר ילדה לו אסנת בת פוטיפרה כהן און את מנשה ואת אפרים. בני בנימין בלה ובכר ואשבל גרה ונעמן Echi, Warosh, Mupim, Chupim, Ve'ard. Kind of crazy names, right? Mupim and Chupim. I was used to make fun of this. Mupim, Chupim, dinner time. Come on, let's go. Okay, bring Ard and Rosh and Gera. Hey, Mupim and Chupim, stop fighting. Hey. All right, little Bible humor. אלה בני רחל אשר יולד יעקב כל נפש 14 ובני דן חושים ובני נפתלי יחצאל וגוני ויצר ושילם אלה בני בלהה אשר נתן לבן לרחל ביתו. ותלד את אלה ליעקב כל נפש 7 כל הנפש הבאה ליעקב מצרים יוצא ירחו מלבד נשי בני יעקב כל נפש 66 ובני יוסף אשר יולד לו במצרים נפש 2 כל הנפש לבית יעקב הבאה מצרים 70. Well, I don't know if we should get into this now. No, I'll go back to if we have time, hopefully. I'll go back to the count. I actually made a number of years ago. I made let me just see if I can bring it up for a second. Okay. Logged in, yeah. Drive. There we go. One second here. Let's see if I could find it. There it is. Sounds checker. Oops. Right. Okay, let me share this for 1 second. And then maybe we can go over it a little bit later. Well, I don't have to share it. It's a list of all the people that went down with Yaakov to Egypt. I should have annotated a bit better. And it gives a summary of the whole thing. So maybe we'll go through it later. I'm not gonna stop now. Okay. Okay, we're starting verse 22. Ele b'nei Rachel asher yulad Yaakov kol nefesh 14, ובני דן חושים, בני נפתלי, יחצאל, וגוני, ויצר, ושילם, אלה בני בלהה אשר נתן לבן לאביתו ותלד את אלה ליעקב, כל נפש 7. כל הנפש הבאה ליעקב מצרים היוצא ירחו מלבד נשי בני יעקב, כל נפש 66, ובני יוסף אשר יולד לו במצרים נפש 2, כל הנפש לבית יעקב הבאה מצרים 70. Okay, and here's another kind of on the way down the summit off the top climax of the story in Genesis, right? Here's another kind of climax where Joseph meets Yaakov. What Yehuda shalach lefanav el Yosef, להורות לפניו גושנה, ויבוא ארצה גושן. ויאסור יוסף מרכבתו, יעל לקראת ישראל אביו, גושנה, וירא אליו, ויפול עד צוואריו, ויבך עד צוואריו עוד. So here we go. This is now where they meet. And Yosef fell on Yaakov's shoulder, on his neck, and they cried and cried more. ויאמר ישראל יד יוסף, אמותה הפעם אחרי ראותי את פניך כי עודך חי. And Israel says to Yosef, now I can die, basically. Amuta apa'am. Literally, I will die this time, but now I can die. Achre re'oti al panecha. After I've seen your face, after my seeing your face, ki od chachai, that you're, and knowing that you're still alive, Verse 31. Yomer Yosef el Echau, el Beit Aviv, E'ele, wa'agida, lefaro, ve'omra elav, אחי ובית אבי אשר בארץ כנען באו אליי, ואנשים רועי צאן, כי אנשי מקנה היו צונאם בקרם. וכל אשר להם הביאו, ויעקי יקרא לכם פרעה ואמר מה מעשיכם, ואמרתם אנשי מקנה היו עבדיך מנעורינו ועד עתה גם אנחנו וגם אבותינו בעבור תשבו בארץ גושן, כי תועבת מצרים כל רועי צאן. So now Joseph gives a little bit of advice to Yaakov about how to do a little bit of a social engineering on Paro, exactly what to say to Paro to get him to agree to put them far away in the land of Goshen. Which, again, Joseph didn't have, or Yaakov didn't know exactly how and when they would exit Egypt, but again, the providence of God is there in the sense that Goshen is the perfect place to exit, right? Because it's up in the north, right? They don't have to pass through all of Egypt, all of the rest of Egypt to get out. They just basically get up and go, and they're already very close to getting out, or they're already out of Egypt, basically. Okay, verse 47. Jacob settles in Goshen. ויבוא יוסף ויגד לפרעה ויאמר אבי ואחי צאנם וכרם וכל אשר להם באו מארץ כנען הינם בארץ גושן ומקצה אחיו לקח 5 אנשים להציגם לפני פרעה פרעה. יאמר פרעה אל אחיו, מה מעשיכם? יאמרו אל פרעה, רועה צאן עבדיכם, גם אנחנו, גם אבותינו. ויאמרו אל פרעה, לגור בארץ בנו, כי אין מרעה לצאן אשר לעבדיך, כי כבד הרעב בארץ כנען, ועתה ישבו נא עבדיך בארץ גושן. אומר פרעה אל יוסף לאמור, אביך ואחיך באו אליך, ארץ מצרים לפניך, כי במיטב הארץ הושב את אביך ואת אחיך, ישבו בארץ גושן, ואם ידעת ויש בם אנשי חיל, שמתם שרי מקנה על אשר לי. ויבא יוסף את יעקב אביו, יעמידהו לפני פרעה, ויברך יעקב את פרעה. יאמר פרעה אל יעקב, כמה ימי שני חייך? ויאמר יעקב אל פרעה, ימי שני מגורי 30 ומעט שנה. He calls the life of his life migurai, my sojournings or my temporary stay. Lagur is always associated with a temporary stay. So this is kind of the Torah is not explicitly a book of philosophy, but philosophy and worldview are embedded into it. And I think this is one place. Okay, Yomer Yaakov el Paro, and Yaakov said to Paro, Yemei Shnei Migurai, the days of my years of my sojournings is the way it's usually translated, but it really means my temporary stay on this earth. Shiloshimu ma'at shana, 130 years, ma'at or ra'im hayu, little or not so much, not so many years, or ra'im and full of trouble, literally evil. Hayu yemei shnei hayai, velo hisigu et yemei shnei hayai avotai, bimei migurehem. Verse 10. ויברך יעקב את פרעה, ויצא מלפני פרעה. That's it. Yaakov never sees Paro again. That's it. We did what, basically, Yosef did what he needed to do. He convinced Paro that the children of Israel should go live in Goshen. That's it. No more use for Paro. In fact, you can kind of almost read between the lines here that Yosef obviously is, does his job well, and is a loyal servant to Paro, but he seems to have a little bit of contempt for the guy. He seems to think the guy's kind of, an idiot to be taken advantage of. It would seem, right, that really his true love is obviously for his father and his brothers and the rest of his the fledgling nation of Israel, the family, and that Paro is there. I work for him. I do a good job. I do the best I can, and I'm honest, and I run everything he is, but it doesn't seem to have any great, love or loyalty to his father. Verse 11, וישב יוסף את אביו ואת אחיו, ויתן להם אחוזה בארץ מצרים, במיטב הארץ, בארץ רמסס, כאשר ציווה פרעה, in the land of Ramses, right? So later we know the Israelites are going to build the store cities of Pithom and Ramses. כאשר ציווה פרעה, ויקלקל יוסף את אביו ואת אחיו ואת כל בית אביו לחם לפי הטף. Verse 13. Now here's Joseph's economic plan. He really knows how to get him. Good businessman. Okay, I won't say anything else. ולחם אין בכל הארץ, כי כבד הרעב מאוד. ותלה. I'm not sure what this word is. תלה. Okay, I'll worry about that later. תלה ארץ מצרים וארץ כנען מפני הרעב. וילקט יוסף את כל הכסף הנמצא בארץ מצרים ובארץ כנען. שבר אשר הם שוברים. יבא יוסף את הכסף בית פרעה, ויתום הכסף מארץ מצרים ומארץ כנען, ויבואו כל מצרים אל יוסף לאמור, הבה לנו לחם, ולמה נמות נגדך כי אפס כסף. And by the way, this is where we get the modern word for zero from this pasuk right here. Ki afes kasef literally means because how would you translate it into English? Limor havelanu lechem belama namut negdecha ki afes kasef. Basically means like, where are we going to find money? Let's see how they translate it here. Has failed, but they take this to mean, or in modern Hebrew, this becomes ephes, which means zero. Ki ephes kasef, because there's no money. So that's where we get the modern word for ephes, for zero, which did not exist in so many ancient cultures, right? The concept of zero, that a word for zero did not exist, and same in ancient Hebrew. There's no word for zero. But from here, the modern Hebrew word ephes, meaning the modern concept of zero, is taken. Afes kasef. It literally means because wherefore, or where is, or where shall we get money? Let's look up this word afes. It's a very interesting word. Let's take a little break again. Verbs cease, fail, come to an end. Genesis, Isaiah. (47:15, 47:16). Psalm Afes lanetzach hasdo, has his loving kindness ceased forever. Isaiah 16:4. Shoded ki afes hametz kala. Yeah, so this puts afes in parallel with kala, which means to end. Let's take a look at this verse for 1 second. And I'll just read this from up here. Yaguru bach nidahai Moav hari seter lamo mipnei shoded ki afes hametz kala shod. It's better. Yaguru bach nidche Moav. Hevi seter lamo mipnei shoded ki afes hametz kala shod. Tamu romes min haaretz. So afes is associated here with kala, which means to come to an end, and tamu, which means to cease. So it seems from the parallelism here that afes does mean, in a sense, come to an end or cease. Let's go back for a second here. Oh, I did it in a different tab, so you can't even see what I'm doing. All right, we're going to go on. Verse 16, Vayomer Yosef, havu miknehem, vetna lechem miknehem, im afes kasef. So now Yosef, being a good Jewish businessman, says, "Okay, you're out of money. Bring your cattle, bring your animals." ויביאו את מקניהם אל יוסף, וייתן להם יוסף לחם בסוסים, ובמקנה הצאן, במקנה הבקר, בחמורים. One second. Just 1 second. Just want to see something for myself. That's the root there. Purchasable animals. I'd always wondered what mikneh, the ultimate root of mikneh is. So here, cattle in general, including cows. It's usually translated as cattle, right? Cattle in general, including cows, sheep, horses, asses, camels, any or all of them, is purchasable domestic animals. So miknehem comes from the word liknot, which means to acquire or purchase. Okay, there's something I was wondering about. I mean, it's obvious that you've seen it, mikneh, from the word liknot, but I never saw it. You know, sometimes you know a word and you just know its meaning, so you don't think about the root behind its meaning. Okay, v'yaviu et miknehem el Yosef. ויתן להם יוסף לחם בסוסים ובקנה הצאן ובקנה הבקר. So here, this is what triggered me to look up the root here. It says b'mikne tza'on, the chattel, I guess you'd say, of the flocks and the chattel of the herds. Hamorim yanhalim belechem bechol miknehem b'shana hahi. Right. So usually mikneh. Right. One more time. So I see something. Yeah, cattle. So because it's translated as cattle, so cattle usually implies herds, like cows, basically, cows, bulls and cows. So I'd always in my head associated the word mikneh with just bulls and cows. And then when I came across this here, it says mikneh tza'on mikneh bakar. So bakar is the herds, meaning basically the cows, the bulls and the cows. And mikneh tza'on means the sheep and the goats, the flocks. And I said to myself, that's weird. How can you have mikneh, which is usually associated with bakar, to also be associated with tza'on? And I said, that means mikneh must mean something wider than that. That's what prompted me to get the underlying root, which I'd never done before. Again, this was always a word that's been in my head for years and years and years. So I had kind of a preconceived notion of what it means. But this is the proper way to study Torah, is when something comes up that, sits in your mind and says, something doesn't make sense there, check it out further. And so that's what I did. That's what I'm doing now, or did. And mikneh, well, I think the BDB describes it best right here. As we said, cattle in general, which can apply to cows, sheep, horses, asses, camels, etc., as purchasable domestic animals. So mikneh, the proper translation for mikneh should be purchasable domestic animals, coming from the underlying root liknot, to purchase or to buy. And then it makes sense. So now in my mind, from now on, instead of thinking of mikneh as cattle, which I think the actual word for cattle, let me just look this up. I think cattle, definition, large ruminant animals with horns and cloven hoofs domesticated for meat or milk, as beasts of burden, cows and oxen. So in English, cattle means just cows and oxen. But I wonder if back in the day, it just meant basically chattel, right? Let me bring this up for 1 second here. Well, I'm looking it up here. I'd have to look at the etymology of cattle. So let's do that for a second. Put this screen on, which I'll probably forget to put back afterwards. So Chrome tab, cattle definition. Okay, so now you can see what I'm looking through here. So have to remember to put it back on the Tanakh afterwards. So cattle. So we can see here, if you can follow on the screen, so cattle is indeed related here to chattel. So in the Middle English word cattle. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going in this direction. English chattel. Cattle. Middle English also denoting personal property or wealth, from Anglo-Norman French catel, variant of Old French catel, see chattel. An item of property other than freehold land, including tangible goods and leasehold interests. So chattel goes back to Old French chatel, medieval Latin capitale, capitalis, so it's like capital. So chattel is related to capital from caput, which means head. Like the modern Spanish cabeza, or modern Portuguese cabeça. Caput became cabeza in Spanish. So chattel chattel is the same as capital, right? Compare capital and chattel. Is cattle a cow? Cattle is plural and generally refers to the bovine species as a whole. The term isn't gender specific, so cattle could refer to a bunch of bulls, males, a bunch of cows, females. Okay, so here, cattle, at least in modern English, refers to the bovine species, meaning cows, oxen, bulls. But really, it relates back to chattel, or it's related to chattel, which is related back to capital. I guess it's related to the word capital. It's the capital. Wealth in the form of money or other assets owned by a person or organization or available for a purpose such as starting a company or investing. And where's the etymology of it? We have it? Yeah. Capital, capitalis caput, obviously relates back to the same word. So cattle is actually a bad translation of this word mikneh. Now let's go back to the Tanakh. Okay. So really, the word mikneh, maybe from now on, it should be translated as chattel rather than cattle. See, again, let me go through my process of thinking here to see how I learn Torah, okay? Because I'm learning Torah every single day. I certainly don't pretend to know everything as other Chachamim and rabbis, but other Chachamim like to come on the air and pretend that they know everything. You know, they're flawless, like the Christians think of their God Jesus, as completely flawless, right? I'm not flawless. I learn new things every single day. Every single day. And one of the ways I learn the most is by doing these studies. It's really wonderful for me. So I just want to lead you through my thinking here, or through my revelation here, shall we say, to understand how I just now better understood what a certain word in the Tanakh means, which will now help me in my Tanakh study and my Tanakh understanding throughout, from now through the into the future. So it says, "Yomer Yosef havu miknehem," and Yosef said, "Bring your," and this word is usually translated as cattle. In almost all English translations, you'll see translated as cattle, right? So even let's look here. If I go, for instance, I'm going to lose the page if I do it. Miknehem. So this is Genesis 47:16. We'll go for a second to the NIV. 47:16. Livestock. Oh, okay. Oh, maybe that's the perfect word for it, not chattel. Oops. Let's try the King James version for the heck of it. Verse 16. Cattle, right. So that's the way it's usually translated as cattle. Now, cattle in my mind means cows, right? Bulls and cows, bovine animals, right? Not sheep. So whenever I saw the word mikneh, I always thought of it as basically bulls and cows, as bovine animals, right? And then I'm reading here, and I've read this portion many times before, but this time this popped out at me, okay? Yomer Yosef havu miknehem v'ten lechem, I'm sorry, over here, mikneh hatzon mikneh bakar. Well, I always thought that mikneh, which is usually translated in English as cattle, only refers to bakar. What is bakar? Bakar are basically the herds, so basically referring to herding animals, cows and or like bulls / cows. I'm not even sure what an ox is. It's the same as basically, I think it means the same as cows and other animals which travel in herds. So let's say, I don't know, deer or caribou would probably be considered bakar, rather than those that travel in flocks, right? So it's the flocks graze. And cattle, I guess the bovine versus the sheep / goats. Okay. At any rate, so but it does say mikneh habakar, and here mikneh hatzon. I said, well, that doesn't make sense. How could you have mikneh hatzon? Cattle. This means the cattle of the sheep, or the cattle of the flocks, the flocking animals such as sheep and goats. That doesn't make sense. It seems like an oxymoron, because I always thought of this as being associated, mikneh, as being associated with only the bakar, with only the herding or the bovine animals, the cows and bulls. And so I said, okay, I must not have a correct understanding of this word mikneh. We looked at it further. We saw it's actually related to the word liknot, which means to purchase. And so therefore the correct translation is not cattle, but something more like livestock or chattel. And now we read this in the English. If I were to translate this to English, and Yosef, Yosef lechem basusim, he'll give them food in return for horses, and the livestock of the flocks, or the chattel of the flocks, and b'miknei bakar, and the livestock of the herds. And that is a much better English translation than cattle. Okay, let's go on now. It's already getting late. So I'm going to end the study. Oh boy, where do we have to get to? We're at 47. And we have to get to 47:27. So I'm going to end the study in the next 5 minutes. Let me just read through now. And then we'll have our afternoon study. ויביאו את מקניהם אל יוסף, ויתן להם יוסף לחם בסוסים ומקנה הצאן ומקנה הבקר ובחמורים וינהלם בלחם לכל מקניהם בכל מקניהם בשנה ההיא. ותתום השנה ההיא, יבוא אליו בשנה השנית, ויאמרו לו, לא נכחד מאדוני, כי אם תם הכסף ומקנה הבהמה אל אדוני, לא נשאר לפני אדוני בלתי אם גביעתנו באדמתנו. So now they're offering their bodies and their land. למה נמות לעיניך? גם אנחנו, גם אדמתנו, קנה אותנו, ואת אדמתנו בלחם. ונחיה אנחנו ואדמתנו עבדים לפרעה, ותן זרע, ונחיה, ולא נמות, והאדמה לא תשם. Verse 20, ויקן יוסף את כל אדמת מצרים לפרעה, כי מכרו מצרים איש שדה, כי חזק עליהם הרעב, Wati ha'aretz lefaro. It seems almost like what's happening now in the pandemic times, where wealth is just being amassed by the by the billionaires, by the oligarchs, the tech robber barons, etc. It's kind of a similar thing here, except here Yosef is running the show for Pharaoh. Okay, he's being a loyal servant to Pharaoh. So he took all of their, he concentrated the city. That's the United States 100 years, right? All land, the farmland is being bought out by the mega corporations and by the mega wealthy, and people are being pushed more and more off the land and into the cities. It's exactly the same thing. רק אדמת כהנים כי חוק לכהנים מאת פרעה יכלו את חוקם נתן להם פרעה על כן לא מלכו את אדמה. So the priests, the pagan priests, to keep their land, and they were Pharaoh. Interesting. In Israel, it's the priests that don't have any land, right? They have no inheritance in the land of Israel. And here in Egypt, there's the priests that keep the land, and everyone else has no land. Just an interesting observation. I don't know if it means anything in particular. Yomer Yosef el ha'am. Yosef said to the people, we're not doing translation. Adama. Wahaya bitvo. So now Yosef is basically, he gives them seed and then he's imposing a 20% tax on all of their produce and no one more. לזרע השדה ולאכלכם, ולאשר בביתכם, ולאכול לטפכם, ולאכול לטפכם. יאמרו איך איתנו, נמצא חן בעיני אדוני וחיינו עבדים לפרעה. וישם אותה יוסף לחוק עד היום הזה על אדמת מצרים לפרעה לחומש, רק אדמת הכהנים לבדם לא הייתה לפרעה. And the last verse here, I think actually that's where it ends. 47:27. וישב ישראל בארץ מצרים, בארץ גושן, יחזו בה ויפרו וירבו מאוד. ויהי יעקב בארץ מצרים 17 שנה, ויהי ימי יעקב שני חייו. Okay, so that's when Yaakov basically dies. Okay. Or gets close to dying. First he gives his blessings. Okay. That's the end of the parsha. We're going to end the study here, the morning study. We're going to pick it up in less than 3 hours. So we have the afternoon study, which is going to be at 4:30 Jerusalem time, 2:30 Greenwich Mean Time, which translates into 9:30 a.m. New York time, which would make it 6:30 a.m. Los Angeles time, and you can figure out the rest. So that's it. Any questions or any comments before we go? If not, then we're going to end the study for now, and we will see you all in a couple of hours for the afternoon study. Shabbat Shalom.